Hello, everybody. I am Peter Goldstein, founder and Chief Synergy Officer for We Did It. And I am so honored and pleased to be here with you today. It's a wonderful day. We have a couple of presenters that are going to help inspire everybody. But first, let me tell you just a little bit about our mission. Our mission is to help create a healthy, happy, vegan world. And to do that, we're focused on how do we create better relationships so that we can inspire hopeful uh, inspire hopeful curiosity in other people and people we care about and people we see in our lives all the time who really could serve the world so much better and serve their own health so much better by shifting lifestyle. So Peter Goldstein, We Did It Health. We offer a couple of things. So We Did It Health is our website. One of the things you can find there is the Million Healthy Life scoreboard. So if you haven't done that yet, please chime in and be counted. We're looking to show the world what vegan and plant-based people, what kind of impact we together as a community have on health, on animal justice, on climate healing, and world hunger. Please watch us on YouTube. We have a wonderful series of lots of content and lots of presenters. We bring together experts from all areas to help us learn how we can be more effective ambassadors, because that's our mission. And with that, I would like to welcome here today's guests, Anne Piotrowski and Dr. Suzanne McAllister, and they're going to talk about their approach with compassionate disagreement and their PAW organization, which is a post-animal use world. So that's what PAW stands for. And they're doing such magnificent work. And with that, I'm going to bring them on screen. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I'm sure you're going to learn much and enjoy this presentation. So welcome, Anne and Suzanne. And please tell everybody more about your work and your passion and how you're serving the world to be a better world.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was such a nice introduction. I love the mission of We Did It, and it just is very compatible with what we've been doing for I don't know how many years now, Suzanne, but it's been a bit, right? It's been a while. So I'm a counselor and advocate, and I started doing something called Conversations with a Friendly Vegan a couple of years after going vegan. And my goal was really to address any of the tricky, awkward, frustrating interactions I had with my community, whether that be my family or friends or just, anyone. It seemed to be that when they found out I was vegan, they had questions, but I enjoyed and welcomed the questions, but sometimes there would be this overtone, this tone of a conversation that would not feel very connected or feel very good. Because in part because my background is in counseling, I approached it the way that I knew how to approach things, was to try to figure out kind of the psychology of it and what the heck was going on here. Why was this so difficult and why was it different? I had certainly been passionate about other things in my life, or gone in kind of been an outlier in some ways in some of my choices, but this definitely took on kind of a different tone. So I just set out to figure that out. And when I had spent a good amount of time, maybe a year, studying and exploring and paying attention to myself and what was going on for me, I decided one day to take my show on the road and test out my theories in a bigger context. So I did a table at a peace fair, and I had just myself at a table and a sign that said, "Hello, how about a conversation with a friendly vegan?" And I was basically I'm just going to invite anybody who wants to come up to the table and into a conversation and see how it goes. And it was one of the best days, one of the luckiest days, because who was next to me at another table, but Suzanne McAllister, who was so sweet. And she came up to me in a quiet moment, and said, "Sit down with me. Tell me what you're doing. This is intriguing. Tell me what you're up to." And we just...
I can say more about that in a
okay.
second.
And we just really hit it off, like, from that moment. I mean, we really just connected personally. And then I think I could speak for both of us when I say we just had a feeling that we could do really good work together. Yeah. I didn't know if I was ever going to do another table again. At that point, it was an experiment. I was just kind of being vulnerable and putting myself out there. But we've done a bunch of tables since then together, and we continue to work on the PAW project. So Compassionate Disagreement is born kind of that work, trying to figure out what is happening. Why do people tend to get defensive? Why do I get triggered with the reactions that I get? What's the mechanism at play there? And how can I soften it so that I can still feel connected to the people in my life and then the people in the world? We need each other. So that's that.
Well, I will jump in here and say that Anne's description is accurate. We were at adjoining tables. I was probably vegan, I don't know how many years at that point. And I was at a table for the Vegan Spirituality Group of Philadelphia, which I've been connected to for 13, 14 years. And what really struck me about what Anne was doing was, number one, the simplicity of it. Conversations with a friendly vegan. And the reason I felt so drawn was that I think many people who changed their lifestyle by eating plant-based, going vegan, at least it was for me, was the response I got was totally unexpected. People say to me, "Oh, well, was it hard?" Well, the diet part was not hard at all. I mean, yes, is there a transition? Absolutely. But what was totally unexpected was the pushback that I got. And unlike you, Anne, the people, and I'm speaking mostly about my family now, it was not curiosity. It was not, "Tell me about it." There was an edge whenever we would have meals together, either sort of these making fun of me, or where do you get your protein, all of those questions that we've all had. And so I was very drawn to what Anne was doing, because I didn't know anybody else who was doing what she was doing, which was focusing on how do you maintain contact with people who you're going to have a relationship with. My family, I'm going to have a relationship with them where I can stay connected and not just want to leave in a huff because I'm upset at the way I'm being treated. So that was my introduction to Anne. And we did start working together, and we came up with this post-animal use world about 1.5 years ago, maybe closer to 2, and it's really developed over that time. But as you said, Anne, it is so compatible, Peter, with how you have characterized We Did It. Our goal was, having been in this vegan world now, for me, it's, I think, 17 years. I have found that pressuring anybody, and maybe it's also my training as a psychologist, you don't get people to do things by pushing them, or you can encourage, you can try to inspire. And so we came up with this, which is, can we ask people to create their vision for what a post-animal use world would look like? And so for me, it's almost like oh, I'm starting to think about the world in a different way, maybe in a way I had never, ever imagined. And so maybe they've never thought about the orca that's in a tank. They've never thought about the horse that's pulling the carriage, but they might start thinking about it. And one thing may lead to another. So that was the genesis of our work together at PAW, and many other things. But we have meetups and Facebook page, and we're on social media. I have a YouTube channel that where I interview advocates and activists, and so we do a bunch of things. Anyway, I think I should let Anne start her presentation.
Yeah, just to think, when you were describing that, Suzanne, I felt one of the things that occurred to me is that what drove me is something that can drive a lot of people. When you were talking about those interactions with family members, there can be a lot of pain there. It can be very painful to feel mocked or dismissed or, kind of belittled, I guess. And I did not want to, that's not the basis for healthy connections and relationships. So having said that, here we go. So there are two things that overlap very much, and that is Conversations with a Friendly Vegan, which is the first thing that I started that I've talked about. That's how Suzanne and I met, and then the PAW Project, which is something that very similar missions, but more geared towards imagining a post-animal use world, helping people to come up with that vision. And then this year, we're really shifting slightly, or focusing greater attention on helping people turn those visions into some concrete action steps. So about us, I think we kind of covered this. Suzanne, do you feel like we can kind of move through these slides? Okay, except to say, so I talk about veganism in a way that prioritizes connection, because I feel strongly that offers a good foundation for not just my own personal well-being and health of my relationships, but also for advocacy. So when I'm out doing tables. So I do have fun picture here. Okay, so this is Suzanne and I at the table. This is not the one where we met. This is when we're running together. It was upgraded from just me at a blank table with a sign to having a few more things up there, and our t-shirts that say, hello, how about a conversation with a friendly vegan? Which, by the way, there's no intended implication that vegans aren't generally friendly, because in my experience, we are mostly, but it's simply to play on that trope to get people to let their guard down for a moment, maybe, and it gets people to come over.
Let me jump in here too, because
Please.
I think when I saw that, and I agree with Anne, I don't meet unfriendly vegans for the most part. However, what I realized is that people assume that we are not going to be friendly. And so there's a built-in defensiveness where they fear they're going to be judged. And that was what I thought was so captivating about what you had come up with.
Thank you. I think what I was, in my mind, I was thinking, if I was saying like, I'm not going to be mean, like, I'm not going to hurt you, I'm not going to do anything terrible, I'm not going to shame you, like, let's just talk. It's just, and the subtext is no judgment, no agenda, just a conversation. So can relax a little bit. Okay, so that's kind of why we're here, to share what we've learned over the years in doing this work, and through our professions, and just kind of, this is what we bring to the table and what we want to share with you. Why we think you're here based on what we've been told and what we're assuming, but so we think you're here because communication can be frustrating and challenging, at least unsatisfying, especially when somebody disagrees with you. That you want to contribute to a more compassionate world, but when you feel like this poor woman, which I sometimes do, it's kind of difficult to stir up those feelings. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but compassion is something that we all have the capacity most people have the capacity, almost all people. If the people who don't, there's something going on that's not quite right. But we do have the capacity for compassion, but oftentimes it's not automatic and it requires some attention. And also being honest and authentic when you're the outlier, it can be really scary, and it can be painful.
Mm-hmm.
I know that, Suzanne, you and I have talked about this, where oftentimes I either felt like I had to be, in order to maintain the peace or keep things nice, I had to be silent. And if I didn't remain silent, then I had to hedge what I really believed. I had to frame it in a way that was going to be acceptable. Or I had to argue and be aggressive. Those seemed to be my options in the beginning, and none of those options felt good.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that was one of the things that I found so compelling about what you were doing, because I had certainly experienced that and was finding it really hard to get to that balance point of not alienating, but being authentic. And it continues to be a challenge. It's not like I have arrived. I need this presentation as well as anybody, because it's an ongoing skill development for me.
It is. It's kind of a circular thing. We do some work, and I'll talk a little bit more about this too, but we do some work on ourselves. So that's the kind of before the conversation, before the connection. There's this before, and then there's work during, and then there's after, where we can process, and then it starts over. And then we do some more internal work, and then we go to another, and each conversation can present unique challenges, and each relationship has its own rules and roles and boundaries, and so there's always something to learn. So we do have a little bit of a disclaimer, and that is that these conversations can be, it's very natural to feel that discomfort or frustration. The goal isn't to suppress or get rid of those feelings, because those feelings are important. They're signals, they're protective measures, they're giving you some information. So just so you know, we're not going to teach you a way to have these conversations go without it and feel completely comfortable. They just generally don't. But the goal is to help you build up a tolerance for some discomfort, to feel good about engaging in these topics, and then to have meaningful relationships where you can be authentic, you can be you. There's no hedging or hiding or negotiating who you are, and that you can speak for animals or for a plant-based diet or for anything that you feel passionate about.
And let me also say that one of the things that is almost like a mantra with you, Anne, that I loved hearing was, if you're feeling, start to welcome the discomfort. That if you're feeling discomfort, it probably means that something is happening here. And if we don't immediately think, oh, that, I need to avoid this, it doesn't feel good, mm-hmm. but just say, oh, here's a chance, here's an opportunity. So it's a different way of relating to discomfort, which I thought, again, was extremely helpful when I first heard you say that.
Yeah. And, I do take into account that sometimes that discomfort is giving us a signal that this isn't safe. I do need to step away from this conversation, or I do need to step away from this situation. But I think we are wired to, if we're not stopping a moment to assess, to have that moment to take a breath and look at it, we'll act as if it's the worst case scenario. We'll fight or flight. We'll do that. Right. So yes, sure. And that's why I say the point isn't to kind of eradicate that feeling. It's to make friends with it and notice it. So. Okay. So I did talk about this, how there's some before work, during, and after. Now, when Suzanne and I were talking, the thing we both said about this presentation, we were kind of reviewing it in preparation for today, is that any one of these sections could be its own presentation. It could be its own hour or two. So we are just doing a quick overview, but we do host online, like Zoom meetings every month usually, and where we do practice this stuff. And basically people who attend can say, here's the situation I had with somebody, and then get feedback on real world situations. So just so you know, we're just going to do a quick overview today. So there's work that you do before is exploring and learning and just doing some introspective work, and then also doing some studying, really. There's the during work, so while you're in the conversation, which is about listening and connecting and then sharing your view. And then after, which is about processing it and self-care, because sometimes, it's work. So let's get into the before. I'm just going to go into the next slides to talk about these, but this is just a list of the steps. So it basically involves doing that introspective work, also practicing mindfulness. That comes in really handy when you're trying to take a deep breath in the moment, reflect on what you're feeling. That is all mindfulness practice. Okay, self-compassion and so on. So I'll just get into kind of it. So I want to start out with just kind of the dictionary definition of compassion, just so we're all on the same page, because I've also kind of expanded on it to apply it to the work that we're doing. But compassion in the dictionary is awareness of suffering with a wish to relieve it. Now, in this work, in these kinds of conversations, I include in compassion that it's an understanding of someone's lived experience. So that's part of it, including our own. And that it comes, I talked about this a few minutes ago, just that it comes naturally, but not automatically. So there are some things that we have it in us to experience, but it requires our attention, turning our mindful attention to it in order to stir it up or ignite it or help it to grow in us. And because a thought I just had the other day about compassion is that compassion isn't something separate from us as human beings, it's part of us. Mm-hmm. And as such, when we do pay attention and help it to grow and thrive within us, we ourselves become more human, more alive. Mm-hmm. That's why I think this work that we do is so important.
And I'd like to add, if I can, the point there of understanding of someone's lived experience. I know you often reference this, and so it's part of how I think too, which is that when we start to have a reaction to somebody else, to sort of step back for a moment and say, wait a second, what was I doing for the first, in my case, 55 years of my life? And so I was not conscious of these things. And so when I find that somebody seems not to be getting it or maybe having a negative reaction, I remind myself, whoa, wait a second. Their worldview is being threatened just by my presence, and to be compassionate, just that as I would have wanted somebody to be compassionate with me if the roles were reversed.
Yeah. And I think,
I was just also going to say, I love the statement, without safety, there is no connection.
Yeah.
And as therapists, counselors, mental health professionals, we know how critical it is for people to feel safe before they can even just start to open up and talk about what is going on in their worlds.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So speaking to people, being compassionate with ourselves, and then also speaking with others and connecting with others with compassion creates that environment that says, I'm not here, I'm not going to harm you. I'm not going to, so it sets this kind of tone for that it's okay for you to be you. It's okay for me to be me. Yeah. We're going to come together, even if we disagree. And, And then as it pertains to kind of advocacy, connection supports mutual understanding, which supports advocacy. Okay. So I'm going to use myself a little as a case study a little bit. So this was kind of the first thing in this introspective journey that we take in order to get to the point where we can be prepared to have these kinds of conversations. So as I got my journal and started to write about, do this exercise of writing about my life, my intention was really to write about when did I go vegan, when did I go vegetarian, and so on, and kind of work my way backwards. As it turned out, I ended up writing much, much more, kind of a personal history. And as I did that, I realized that over my life so far, like most people's lives, there have been great things, some highs, there have been really low points, a lot of mistakes and total screw-ups, and recovery from those mistakes. And mixed in with the highs and lows, one or two, tragic things that happened that I also had to grieve and recover from and move through. As I did this exercise, it was really emotional. It was really meaningful. And at the end, when I kind of got everything out at that moment that I felt I needed to get out, two main things happened through this. One is that rather than look upon my past self with judgment, as I probably did at the time that I was making the mistakes or not doing the right thing, instead of looking with that critical eye, I had this kind of upwelling of tremendous compassion for myself, for my past self. And then connected with that was this realization, this kind of very honest and deep realization that no matter what I was doing or what good or bad decisions I was making, I was doing the best I could with what I had at the time. Whether that was with whatever support system I had at the time, with what information I had at the time, with what maturity level I had at the time, or feeling of readiness to make any particular decisions or changes in my life.
I have a question, Anne.
Sure.
Just as I'm listening to you, and obviously we've talked about this before, but I was just thinking in terms of our audience. You and I are both trained we're mental health professionals.
Correct.
And so we've gone through a lot in our training that allowed us to use ourselves as case studies. And I'm wondering, do you have any comments you want to make about people who may be watching this and who think, oh, that's a good idea. Let me write myself as a case study. Anything that you want to say about the caution?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because absolutely. Even with training and with my training as a therapist, and then with my own history going to therapy, this was a very emotional process to go through. And it's in particular, if there is any history of trauma or something that you might come up against as you're going through this, it is a very powerful exercise, but it's a great one to go through with a trusted therapist. Absolutely. Okay. To do it together with a therapist is such a great idea. Like I said,
a person that you feel totally comfortable with and who you knows you and is going to support you, even if you start revealing things of, whoa, I didn't know about that.
Yes.
That is not somebody who's not going to be thrown.
Somebody who you can be vulnerable with.
Good way.
Because you will feel vulnerable for sure. Yeah. And like I said, it's not that I set out to do this deeper, more meaningful, although it turned out to be, I had learned some things that I think were really applicable to this work. I meant to just put this context of how long it took me to go vegan, right? So if I look at that real quick, and so by the way, this is me, that's the baby is me. And I'm an only child, these are my cousins and aunt, but I was an omnivore for 27 years, and what prompted me to change that is that I got a migraine attack, the first one, when I was 27 years old, and it was so painful and powerful that I said I have to, once I recovered from it, I said I have to do some research and figure out, again, research is how I tend to solve my life's problems, but I have to figure out what preventative measures I can take. That led me to a yoga class, which in that yoga class, I met somebody who was 14 years old and vegetarian, which piqued my interest. And then I learned about mindfulness, and then ahimsa, the concept of just doing no harm. And all of this came together, and I made a decision to go pescatarian. Now, I think I would have gone vegetarian, but I had a boyfriend at the time, and he was absolutely committed to remaining an omnivore. And there was this social pressure and relationship pressure to not rock the boat too much. So I was getting a little more clear on what I wanted, but I wasn't yet at a point where I could go further than being pescatarian. So I did that for some years, and then went vegetarian, broke up with that guy, and then went vegetarian, and then ultimately, finally, at 43, went vegan. And if I frame this to you another way, in this chart, you see my age and what I was, and what was my openness to going vegan at any of these times. It was absolutely zero until it wasn't, until I went vegan. I was very happily vegetarian and thought that I would be vegetarian for my whole life. And something got in my way, something disrupted my reality, something compelling enough that prompted me to go further with it. Mm-hmm. Now, how open was I to even talking about it? So if somebody had, a vegan person had come into my life in some way and started to talk about it, well, I was kind of polite about it. So I'd say I was open to it too, when I was an omnivore. And then that did kind of steadily go up. And now I'll talk about it any old time. But how nuts did I think it was to go vegan? Well, when I was an omnivore, absolutely. I thought it was just completely out of reach, but why would anybody want to do that? And then that steadily kind of, that did go down over time. And of course, now I think it's completely reasonable. So I can't see who's out there. I'm just going to say that there's people out there listening, and I would like you to take just a moment. If you have a notebook, I'm going to kind of stop talking for just about like 2 or 3 minutes, and just give you a moment to kind of sketch out when did you go plant-based or vegan, and was there a path for you, or did you go from omnivore to vegan? And I'm just going to set a timer and let you do that. Suzanne, what do you think? 2 minutes?
I think 2 minutes is fine.
Okay.
And this plants the seed for people. Like you said, you didn't set out to write as much as you did, and people might get inspired to do a lot more, or just boom, this is the way it was, or this is where I am now. And so, yeah. I think 2 minutes is fine.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly is something to kind of expand on over time. But it's just to kind of get a rough idea, a rough outline of it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to keep moving on because I know I took a look at the time. So again, just kind of keep working with yourself with that and see if also you can kind of get in touch with that sense of compassion and for your prior self, your whatever missteps or roads you went down, if you can get in touch with that. This is a foundation for kind of developing a sense of self-compassion, which then kind of radiates out of us. So when we can be more compassionate towards ourselves, and build that kind of compassion muscle, it does help us to be more compassionate in the world. So another thing that is really helpful is to understand why we and people in general stick to bad ideas, even when there's lots of evidence that contradicts what we believe. And there are a couple of reasons so one of the reasons it's so difficult is because old statement here, because the truth doesn't matter, not at first. Okay, so what matters at first isn't what is true, but what is believed. And we believe things for all different reasons that are a lot of times not based in any kind of logical truth. That's based on what we were taught mostly in the first 5 years of our lives. So a lot of these lessons kind of carry through, become part of our identity, and therefore they're things that we don't even question. They're just the way we move through life. Almost every decision we make day in and day out isn't something we're thinking through step by step or asking ourselves, should I, shouldn't I, is this right or wrong? It's just what we've learned to do ages ago. Certainly what we eat is a foundational lesson. We learn it, and the people who we trust, are in our lives or who are meant to be there as trustworthy adults teaching us, they are telling us what is okay and what is right and what is wrong. And when there are discrepancies, a lot of times we're not taught to really explore those discrepancies. It's just the way it is. It's the way of our people kind of thing. So we develop kind of the ability to think logically and to do some critical thinking. Of course we do. But also there's this wealth of gut information, this embedded information that drives almost all of our behavior. And that comes very automatically, while our critical thinking is something that we do intentionally. So this is one of the reasons when you speak with somebody and when you're speaking from logic and they're coming to you from what they learned when they were, 2 years old, their gut intuition intelligence, there's a disconnect. So Jonathan Haidt wrote a book called The Righteous Mind, and he describes it as we are an elephant and a rider, the elephant being that gut emotional state, and then the rider being the critical thinking. And if these two are out of sync, it can create some problems. So it's like speak to the elephant first when you're speaking with somebody. And how do you, so I'll get into how do you do that? How do you speak to the elephant first? Social norms, we all kind of know what this is, but it's, that's the process of socialization. So these lessons that become our identity, become foundational, they're just there. And unless something comes up that's compelling enough to cause us to question it, we'll stick with it. Us going vegan, when somebody in our lives becomes aware of that, or they give us some pushback about that, or going plant-based, we are not yet a compelling enough reason for them to toss out everything they've learned up until that point, or they thought they knew up until that point. What I like to call this is that and for people, whether they're in my life or I'm meeting them at a table, and I may never see them again, is that I'm not going to be I'm not going to be the one that sees them, the light bulb go off and then them make a big change in their life. I'm a priming experience. I offer a priming experience. And for me, over those years, from going pescatarian to vegan, there were many, many, many priming experiences, some significant enough for me to remember them and be able to recount them, like meeting that vegetarian 14-year-old. And then others that I'm sure happened many times, many things that I was exposed to. And like many people, when I was exposed to, let's say, animal, the torture of animal agriculture, I rejected and said, I can't even look at that. I can't bear to see it. But I still, kept doing my thing. So we know the social norm is weighted in this way. So that's what we're dealing with. And just a reminder that it's natural to feel anxious or frustrated when we're challenging social norms. Okay, so when you're in it, when you're in the conversation, the first step when somebody says something to you that it might start to sort of stir things up, you're starting to notice. For me, it's like kind of like right, like sometimes stomach, sometimes like right in here, heartbeat might go a little faster. I might start to like clench a little bit, feel a little tense. My hands get cold. I don't know. I don't know if that's just a me thing or if that happens, but I think that, the blood goes to the core, right? The extremities get cold. And that's my body, that's my brain and body preparing for fight or flight. So I know now to recognize that as my signs of, I'm getting like activated here. So the first thing to do is just slow down and breathe, listen to the person, listen to what they're saying, and just listen to myself, listen to what my own body is telling me. So quick responses, if I were to just come out with something quick, that's coming from my gut, that's not the cognitive. And slow responses gives me the time to connect with compassion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me just say a few things about this, and we don't have time to really even practice mindfulness, but this whole idea that Anne is referring to, a mindfulness practice can be extremely helpful in that slowing down. And it's called a practice for a good reason, which is that it's not just something that you can pick up when you need it, like, oh, I'm thirsty, I'm going to pick up some water. It really is something that one develops. And what I would say is even something as simple as a 2 or 3 minute practice every day will go a long way towards remembering in those moments when you are starting to feel activated, that you can say, oh, let me slow down here for a moment. Let me take a deep breath. Another part of it that I think can be very, very important is noticing where it is in your body. And Anne already described that. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's easy for me to have all kinds of physical reactions to things and not be aware of it. So I'm not even picking up on the cues. But if I'm doing a mindfulness practice, which I have now for many years, I'm much more apt to notice when it's happening. The other thing that I will say about it is, if you're going into a situation that you think might be a challenge, to actually remind yourself, okay, I'm going in. I know about breathing deeply. I know about slowing down. I know about not just boom, saying the first thing that comes out of my mouth, because that may not be the best thing for me to do. So there are all kinds of things, and we could probably do a whole session on mindfulness and how that can help you in these challenging situations. How do I stay connected to me, and how do I maintain connection with the other? So
yeah. It is really helpful. It's actually a critical part of this, I think. And also, I think sometimes what I noticed in myself was that I was spending a lot of energy telling myself a story about what that person was saying. So I was hearing it as resistance, excuses, I was kind of weaving a narrative around that. Oh, I've heard that before, or oh, that's this, that, or the other thing. And with mindfulness, I learned that how to kind of, and also nonviolent communication, which helps. Learning about that helped me to shift. Just like sometimes it's these absolutely tiny little shifts in your perspective that makes an enormous difference. So instead of hearing it that way, I started to listen to just simple explanations without weaving that story. And I stopped interpreting what they were saying. I just listened. And in that time asked questions, about, to clarify, to listen until I felt like I fully understood. And in that I would, now here comes a kind of extension or a connection, a bridging, which is there's almost always common ground. Now, if there isn't any, there isn't any. So I find honest common ground. But most likely because I've done that work of reviewing my own history, I know that I can relate to making those excuses or having those ideas that when I look upon them now, I know they didn't make sense logically. But I didn't know that then. So I can say to somebody, oh, you know what? I used to think that way too. And then in that, again, it's something we referred to before, but it's sending the message. This is a safe place for us to share what we really believe and what we really think, even if we disagree. Okay, so that.
I think what you're talking about, at least if I'm understanding you correctly, is that there's a shift where I'm going from whatever I'm feeling, whatever I think is important to say, to putting myself in the other person's shoes and saying, I wonder what, and like you said, with curiosity, I wonder what's going on with that person. So it's a shift away from me and my discomfort or my need to express something to, if I'm sensing that there's something going on here, to, I wonder what he or she is feeling right now.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to do.
It's not easy.
Critical.
It is. It's really about listening, just like mindfulness is a practice. Learning to truly listen is a practice. I know that I would find myself while the person was speaking and they're sharing something with me about themselves, I would spend that time constructing my response.
Exactly. Yes.
That's not really great listening.
Not helpful. Not helpful.
No, it's certainly not helping me connect with any compassion. I'm not really connecting with that person and what they're saying and what they're telling me. I'm making up a story about what they're telling me, and I'm coming up with my perfect response. And this tended to happen even more once I learned over time, when I learned more about just the answers to the common, things that people say when they learn you're vegan. I felt like I have the perfect comeback for that or something. And that's just not that helpful. I can correct some misconceptions, but that's later.
Yeah.
That's not first. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I know we're running out of time, so I'm just going to share this kind of way that I look at it. Again, I said that sometimes it's these tiny little shifts in the way you look at something that can really make a difference. When I'm ready to share what I believe, I see it as me sharing like a scrapbook or a photo album. I'm inviting somebody to learn something about me, and I'm sharing it with them. You never take a photo album and force somebody to look at it and demand that they, acknowledge something about it. It's a sharing of something. It's communing with someone. And then when I do say something, because at that point I fully understood what they said, I've connected by saying, I understand, or I used to think that way. And now I'm saying something that is probably contrary to that, right? Because I've learned to see it this way, in a different way. I check in and say, so how does that land with you? What do you think about that? You have any thoughts on that? They might say, oh, well, it's something to think about or whatever. It might not go any further than that. At that point, I let it go.
Yeah.
Because really, whatever happens after that, it's just not my business. It's not mine to do anything with. My job is to do the inviting. But anyway, I like the visual of like the photo album. Okay, so after, I'll go through this pretty quickly, but as Suzanne and I both know, right, Suzanne, that these conversations can sometimes take a lot out of us, right? So especially I think if we're like, for myself, like I'm a highly sensitive person. I'm constantly kind of absorbing this like emotional energy, and I really do feel really tired afterwards, even with like really, good conversations. I think I still feel kind of exhausted afterwards. So I know the day after I do a table, or even after the day after a table, I don't plan anything except to like stay in my pajamas and like relax.
Yeah.
Because
and
it's
you
just
and I do a lot of, if one of us have had a particularly challenging situation, we do chickens with
yes,
and
yes.
they're invaluable.
Processing is so important, finding like-minded people to process with, that you don't have to explain why you believe what you believe with somebody who already gets that, and then being able to kind of review that. I think that's kind of what we try to provide in those monthly meetups. And I always recommend keeping a journal. There's something about writing. You could type it too, but in one way or form or another, kind of helps you to process it more personally. So, and then sometimes compassion comes way after. Something happened a few weeks ago that really I couldn't respond in the moment with the person. I couldn't drum up the compassion, so I stayed pretty quiet. And then I processed it with Suzanne and a couple of other people. And then like 3 hours later, I was like, oh, there's the compassion. There it is. Now, that won't necessarily help me with that particular person, because I don't know if I'll see that particular person again, but it will help me for the next conversation, because it will happen again. I will feel that trick. I realized too something interesting, that in that moment, I realized that I felt like I was about 13 years old. That person must have reminded me of something that brought me back to a time when I couldn't speak something that was contrary to what the authority person was speaking, So anyway, for what it's worth. There are times when not to bother. So the rule is everybody walks away with their dignity intact. So if things get a little out of hand and there's something like going on like this picture, that's not going to do anybody any good. The goal in this is to connect, not to become a better punching bag or anything like that. So you do have a right to protect yourself, not just from abuse. Of course, you have a right to protect yourself from abuse. But honestly, I have to protect myself from getting like significantly annoyed, because that's not that space that I want to live in a lot of the time. So I just modulate, and I just, with that mindfulness, paying attention, I did make a decision. I say, do I want to continue here, or do I want to say, I'm feeling extra tired right now, and this is an important conversation. I think I'm going to need to pick it up at another time, if that's okay, and then move on from there. But in some way, let it come to an end. And sometimes people breach boundaries a lot. I don't deal with that. I don't really take abuse during these conversations. Yeah. That's not what it's all about. And sometimes I'm feeling overwhelmed and need a break. And that is okay to do. Okay. We don't have time to go through that, but it's basically everything that we talked about. And I will be sharing like a cheat sheet on the replay. So when it's posted on YouTube, the description will get a summary on there.
And on that, is there a way for people to connect with us?
Yes.
Okay.
There will be, yeah. So further discussion, just some things that are kind of always in the back of our minds about what to do is that, what Suzanne and I are both vegan primarily for ethical reasons. So we always have animals kind of at the forefront of our minds when we do our advocacy. And so is it too much to expect some days to engage in this calm discourse while like billions of animals are needlessly suffering? Should we instead be out there kind of like raising hell somehow, I think that there is a place for all types of advocacy. I've certainly been out there protesting and such. Any types of peaceful advocacy I'm in favor of. And this is just something that is kind of what I call everyday advocacy. It's how to interact with just day in and day out. We are vegans or plant-based living in a non-vegan world, in a predominantly non-vegan world. So it's the water we're swimming in. So we need to be able to have a way to feel good and connected and compassionate day in and day out, not just feel active on those days that we're doing something specific. So,
and I want to add that when I became vegan, I was very fortunate, just through happenstance, to run into a woman who had started something called Vegan Spirituality Group of Philadelphia, which we have listed here. But there are vegan spirituality groups throughout the country. So actually, there may even be some throughout the world. I'm not sure. But if you go to veganspirituality.com, you will see resources there. For me, having a support like that was absolutely invaluable in my early days. It still is now, but it was crucial in the beginning. I felt extremely lonely and isolated. I think things are different now, 17 years later, but I think it's still, it can be a challenge. So I'm saying that by encouraging you to get support through We Did It, or through Vegan Spirituality, or through there are many, many vegan groups that you can connect with, and I really recommend it.
Absolutely. I do too, for sure. So I think that we are concluding now, and here's our contact information. If anybody wants, please do stay in touch. I think we're going to be doing some work with We Did It, and so hopefully we will.
Yes.
See you again.
Thank you for your attention, and thank you, Peter and We Did It, for inviting us.
Oh, we can't hear you, Peter. There you go.
Oh, here we go. Well, thank you very much for being here and for presenting your remarkably important and wise information. I love your approach and inviting people to have a friendly conversation. I mean, it's we'd love to understand what it is that people are thinking when. What is it that they're afraid of to have a conversation? And I'm sure there's lots of things that they can be afraid of, and they may have experienced arguments, and it may be that they really know that they care about animals, not just their dogs, and they don't want to deal with it because they don't want to face what it is that they feel they're doing wrong. But so many beautiful things you mentioned here, and I have all kinds of notes, but I'm afraid we're running out of time. So I'm not going to, we're going to let these go for now, but I would love to invite you to join us again and do some of your workshops. I love that you're doing your groups where people can process after the fact, and that's really very much part of our vision too. Is we're building community, and to have a community where ideally what we're looking for and hoping for is eventually get to have such a large community that anytime any of our ambassadors, any of us run into a disturbing situation, we can within hours have a group that's running real time, and we can join and vent and get the support we need. So
wonderful.
I love that you're doing that, and maybe we can invite you to do some workshops, and we look forward to doing that. And everybody watching this, We Did It Health with our Facebook presence and our YouTube presence, and coming soon our community platform with our website and all those things. I look forward to sharing in the future, but for now we definitely will be sharing more workshops, and we'll have them on our calendar. We have a calendar, so people watching this, if you're looking for, if you have an emergency, if you urgently need support to vent about something, you certainly can find it. And what is your meetup group then, where somebody could get that kind of support?
Yes, so I have our websites up on the screen right now, and whenever we schedule one, it will be posted on both websites. So they can go there. It is through Meetup. It's through the Vegan Spirituality Group of Philadelphia. We're running them, but they shared their their platform because they have a bigger reach than we do. So this is like advocates helping advocates.
Yeah.
So they've done that and been very supportive of the work that we've been doing. So.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, and I'm sure they're doing amazing work. As spirituality is such an important part of being vegan, so that's a whole nother area that we'd love to have conversations on, and look forward to perhaps connecting with the leaders there and inviting them to present to our community. So with
wonderful.
that,
okay.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you ladies would like to share?
The only thing is that because we did run out of any kind of Q&A time, if anybody does have questions that come up, just reach out to us. We have our email addresses there. We'll I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Correct. Yeah.
Absolutely. And at the same time, also to start conversations on our YouTube channel. When you watch this video, we will monitor and participate and answer questions there, as well as on our Facebook group. So Whole Food Plant-Based Vegan and Whole Food Plant-Based Ambassadors is the Facebook group, and please have the conversations there, or anywhere. Email them, because all your questions, all your comments, all your concerns are so important, because every little bit helps us move closer to that healthy, happy, well-fed vegan world that we're all looking forward to having. And of course, that's what PAWS is about, right? A post-animal cruelty world. So
yes.
Well, with that, thank you, everybody, and I'm going to close this broadcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Namaste, vegan.
Namaste.